Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for the introduction. I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you great.
Great. Just a bit of intros, and thank you for the intro again. If you're not familiar with the Herjavec Group, you may know or you may watch Shark Tank in US, and you know Robert Herjavec as the good shark. So Herjavec Group is his main company for cybersecurity. We've been around for 16 years. I got the privilege to be with the company for a number of years. And today we will talk about SASE, and I will try to provide my view on SASE, what is part of SASE, why it's important, and why many of us will probably say this word many, many times, and many vendors probably will indicate that they are part of SASE in the next 2, 3, maybe 4 years and even more. So just to summarize about myself, I've been around IT and cybersecurity for 20 years. I started my career in the Navy. It's an amazing place to learn a lot about networking, hardware, computers, switches, ring networks, and many different things. Later on, I switched to Checkpoint, where I learned more about firewalls and network security. And for the last 14 years, I've been with Herjavec Group, based in Canada, Toronto. I got the fortune to spend many hours with many different customers across Europe, Canada, and North America to understand more about the architecture, help them with their security, help them with the vendor selection. And this is one of the reasons why I started the podcast. Me and a friend of mine covering SASE and architecture right now at SASE, but we were moving to other topics as well. And I had a lot of fun speaking to many different vendors and also view SASE from many different angles. And I hope I will be able to explain my view and what I see about it and why it's very important. First of all, what does SASE mean? Secure Access Service Edge. It's a term that was defined by a gentleman named Neil McDonald from Gartner, and it only was defined around a year ago. And even so, it's only been a year old. Already many vendors are right now trying to be part of it. And I guess there's two reasons. One is as the service, and the second one is because we all work from home, and many SASE components include protection of people working from home. What is SASE in my mind? It's an unification of network and security under one connected architecture. When I say connected architecture, it doesn't mean it's only one vendor. It could be potentially multiple vendors working together. But I think it's very important to have the connectivity, to have the connection between vendors to make it happen. And I will elaborate more about where is the market is going and where we see right now. I define and I divide SASE between two different buckets. One is the network bucket, and the second one is the security bucket. The network bucket is everything related to bring the traffic from the end user, could be from the office or from the home, to the internet via SASE provider or to the data center, and can be done in many different ways. The security bucket has three main components. Again, this is my view on this. As Kevin mentioned, different people provide different views. And it consists from three main pillars. Zero trust network access, what we know as remote access or evolution of remote access, cloud access security broker. Mike did a very good explanation about cloud access security broker, so he probably saved some time for me, but I will still be talking about this a bit. And the last one is secure web gateway and firewall as a service. I put them in one pillar because both of them are inline network security control. Mike mentioned as a service as well, and I want to emphasize how as a service is very important in my mind as well. If we put security aside for a couple of minutes and just see what are we been doing for the last couple of years, we're switching from Exchange to Office 365, we're using Salesforce as a service, and many other things. We're thinking from buying a solution and maintaining the solution to outsource the functionality to someone that specializes in this. I'm sure many of you had the experience of upgrading a firewall, maintaining a switch or web proxy, putting version, spending money to upgrade a version. Or when a vendor releases a patch, you now need to run and quickly update the patch. And it may take days, weeks, and in some cases even more, depend how big is your environment. Also a very important part, especially in inline and network security, is SSL inspection. More and more traffic right now is SSL. And our keys for encryption become bigger from 2000 to 4000. It means you need more hardware to decrypt such traffic. It means you need bigger boxes, and also you need to upgrade the boxes from time to time, every 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. And in some cases, you maybe heard the vendor telling you, oh, Mr. Customer, we cannot upgrade your appliance to the latest version. You need to buy a newer hardware. With as a service, as a vendor that maintains their own cloud, private cloud or public cloud, they are now responsible on putting the version, updating the version. There is no more problems of outdated hardware, and there is no more problem with scalability. When the holidays come, we shouldn't be worried about this. This is all vendor responsibility. Yes, you want to make sure that the vendor is reliable, and you want to do all the due diligence to check that the vendor has SOC 2 compliance and many other certifications to make sure they treat your data correctly. But there's, in my mind, more benefits of as a service versus holding and maintaining your own hardware. Before we move and talk more about SASE, I want to do a quick trip in history and explain how we got here. Because SASE by itself, it's not a security control. It's a family of different products. Let's start with security. For the last 20 years, we had many different companies and many different features that helping us in our daily lives. From firewalls 20 years ago with Checkpoint and Cisco, to URL filtering, DNS filtering, sandboxing, endpoint solution DLP, remote access, and many, many more. And you're probably already familiar and see that some of these components are now part of SASE. Such just take all this and package this, maybe in one vendor, maybe in multiple vendors. Let's switch and talk about network. With the network part, we have very similar picture. Caching on information, traffic shaping, routing, high availability. We all know that we really want to be highly available with our appliances, make sure there's no downtime, make sure we can do RMA quickly and all this good stuff. With SASE, it's become a bit different, but still incorporate all these great features under this family. Where we are right now. So first of all, there's just many, many vendors that want to play in this pond. There's probably 4 or 5 main SD-WAN, CASB vendors, web security, firewalls, and ZTNA. But there is many others that will be playing in the SASE space as well. Majority of them will start with one pillar, as a CASB, for example, will later on add secure web gateway, ZTNA, maybe IDaaS as well. But eventually we will see many players taking one part of SASE and will try to provide functionality or will provide functionality. I personally don't believe that one player will be able to do everything in SASE, from the network to all the security features. But we'll see many vendors, such as BitGlass, that provide a lot of security functionality and then collaborate with the network security companies to provide a more cohesive solution. So let's start. The network part. There is 2 main things here. One is the logical part on top, and second is the physical part. As an end user, you really not have a lot of say on the physical. You can choose the cable, if it's a wireless, fiber, or satellite. But beside this, the moment you got it, you don't have any things you can change here. The logical part is much more interesting in my mind, because the SASE providers can change, can deploy, can do things differently. They can choose the protocols they want to use to take your traffic from where you are to the bigger internet in a secure way. And here comes the important points. How secure is the traffic from you to the internet or to where you want to go? You want to make sure it's nobody alternate and change the traffic. How's your high availability? What happened if you lost connectivity? Will it automatically switch? What happened if you change networks? How fast you will get from where you want, from you location to the end user location or to the data center location? Do I need to go where the backbone of the SASE provider, or it will get me quickly to the destination? This is very important points when you're talking to providers and when you're looking and shopping for SASE. Try to understand how your traffic will flow, and we'll touch base later on when we connect all together. Let's move on to the security bucket. And I want to start from Security Web Gateway, especially right now. When we work from home, which means we are going to the internet. When we used to work from the office, majority of us and the companies already route the traffic from your location via a web gateway or a firewall for inspection. There's two main parts here. Majority of the enterprises have a policy that define what you can or cannot do. You may not allow to go to gambling sites, gaming sites, or any other sites during the day or in general. When you now work from home, how do we actually enforce such policies? This is one. Two, we want to protect the end user from the internet, malware, ransomware, and many other different things that we don't want to impact the user. By protecting the user, we also protecting the customer itself, because we don't want the traffic and the bad things coming from the end user to the data center or to the offices. So secure web gateway is quite important as a firewall as a service when you work from home. And it incorporates many different features that we can see on the left, such as URL filtering, IPS. We spoke about SSL inspection, of course, malware. Somebody asked before about browser isolation. I think browser isolation is part of network because it's part of you browsing. There's many different ways to use it. In my mind, you don't really want to isolate everything, but it's a very interesting way when you can use browser isolation for unknown sites or potentially sites that only were created or domains or only were created for the last 30 days. This way, you're not impacting your user day-by-day activities. You still give them access, but you're protecting the users as well. Let's move to the second one, Zero Trust Network Access. As I mentioned in the beginning, ZTNA is an evolution of remote access. Remote access has been around for a long time, but it wasn't perfect. First of all, it gave us access to a range of IPs. Second, it required a NAT or a rule on your firewall or on your router to get the traffic in. And it opened a potential hole for the bad guys to be able to hack your environment. And in case there's a vulnerability on your remote access solution, you now need to go and patch it. And usually they discovered after something already happened. With Zero Trust Network Access, we flip it. We only allow access to the applications you need. We use users' identification to connect. We also, in many cases, use device check or posture check to see from which device you are coming. So we are already eliminating a lot of the problems already from the connectivity. We also flipping the way you connect. There is no need to open anything on your firewall or on your routers because ZTNA opened a reverse tunnel to the SASE cloud, and the SASE cloud doing the gluing between your connection and the connection back to the office or potentially to the IaaS or SaaS applications. This way, the bad guys or the hackers will not even know that you're using a remote access solution. There is no issue with vulnerabilities because there's nothing vulnerable, nothing need to be opened. And by this, we provide a much better connectivity and more secure connectivity as well. There's also a very interesting part here as well from a network perspective. With the traditional remote access, we usually tell the customers to route all the traffic to the office. Why? Because there's the only way that we can ensure the internet access is done through the firewall or your filtering devices. If we divide and employ secure web gateway and use ZTNA, that all the traffic that's going to the internet will use secure web gateway, still protected, and the traffic need to go to the office will use ZTNA. So we still have security, we still inspect all the traffic, but now we don't need so much bandwidth going to the office. There's a case here that potentially people say, do I really want to inspect Zoom? Do I really want to inspect Office 365? It's a debatable situation, and I'm more than happy to talk offline what to do about it. But definitely suggest to run the traffic through Security Web Gateway on everything else. CASB architecture. Before I move to a slide to talk about the views of the graphical of the CASB, I want to talk about different controls. Mike mentioned before about inline and indirect and shadow IT. Shadow IT is the basic way for you to understand what you have. And this is how CASB started 5 or 6 years ago. They came to a customer, they told us, Mr. Customer, please provide your logs, please provide what you have. We will run it through our engine and it will give you all the applications that are not supposed to be or potentially supposed to be running in your environment. Right now, it's very, very easy. If you don't get what you want from UIT, you take your credit card, you go to Amazon, you go to OneDrive, you buy what you want, and now you have your own IT infrastructure. You can upload files, you can potentially run computers in AWS or Azure, and it's important to understand what you have. And after you have it, you can decide what you can do with it. I mark the proxy, forward proxy and gateway in red, because in my mind, secure web gateway is an important part of CASB. So the moment you shop for CASB, you kind of automatically shop for secure web gateway or firewall as well, because this is the inline connection to check what you're doing and block such applications or inspect for malware. The other control is reverse proxy. If you're coming from home or you're coming from a location that I cannot inspect the traffic inline, I want to reverse it. I want to actually use the domain, let my identity provider to move me to reverse proxy, and then I become inline as well, and I can check on the files and what I can do. The last two are API. And I'm going to switch to a graphical slide here. With the API is a bit different because I'm assuming there's just no way to inspect it. It could be I cannot inspect the traffic because the traffic is encrypted. It could be because I'm coming from a BYOD device and there's no way to see it. But the interesting part here is that I can do different things with the API checks. I can check the traffic for DLP. I can check and understand who are you sharing the traffic with. Potentially, I want to upload a file to the internet and I want to share the file with Kevin. But by mistake, I share the file not with Kevin, with multiple people. It could be by mistake, or maybe I did it on purpose because I was thinking it's going to be easier for Kevin to download the file. My CASB provider can identify such a problem and potentially disable the share, encrypt the file, or check it and gets DLP to tell me if I can do it. So it's become very, very important. Same applies with IIS. It's relatively newer controls. Gartner calls them CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, where I can check and assess my IIS environment for best practices. S3 shares that you all are hearing this every couple of weeks. Some company forgot to close the S3 buckets or open it wide and people download the information. There's also so many different controls in AWS. I think there's around 40 different thousand options to do it. Human being is not able to understand and know everything and not make a mistake. This is why it's important to have it. And the beauty of this, if I do everything from one provider, I'm gonna leverage the same DLP controls, the same malware controls, and the declassification. So let's try to stitch all together. If you're working from home, and majority of us are right now working from home, I need to internet, I need to browse, I need to have remote access. I'm doing all this from one device. There's a different ways to route the traffic. We used to use pack files in the past, but I think the more gentle control is using a client. By using a client, I have much more flexibility on the routing. I have much more flexibility on what I can do. And also, I now have more information about the device as well, and I can do more checks, like a posture check, for example. And I want to provide some consideration on the vendor selection. One is traffic routing optimization. If I right now use multiple providers or multiple vendors for ZTNA, CASB, or Secure Web Gateway, I now need to consider how the traffic will route between them. So let's think about this. If my ZTNA provider doing the checks in their cloud, and I need to take all my traffic from on-premises to their cloud, then it will divide the traffic between internet and my data center. And on top of this, I have my secure web gateway. I may have a serial connection between my home, the ZTNA provider, and then the secure web gateway provider. So instead of increasing my performance, decreasing my latency, have a better experience, I may suffer. So think about when you're choosing a provider, how's your router traffic and what they do. Not all of them work like this. Some of them work differently. In a different case, maybe the decisions are made right on the endpoint. Then it means that you need to put exclusions on the second provider or the first provider to make sure the traffic is going where it's supposed to be going. Device posture check or user identification. With every provider, you will now need to do device posture check and understand what needs to be done and can you connect or not connect. It means multiplying the work and of course have more dashboards as well. The one that's also very important is user behavior. The more data your security provider have, the smarter it can make decisions and the more information it can provide to you. If Evgeniy right now connecting from Toronto, but in 5 minutes you see connection from Evgeniy coming from Singapore, it could be fishy. Now, if you have multiple providers, you will need to see it more. But with the one provider, you will see much more information, what kind of data Evgeniy uploading and downloading, and create a better profile for Evgeniy. Policy creation. I mentioned a bit before about this. When you create policy, do you really want to create policy in different dashboards? DLP is probably a very important one because there's multiple locations that you need to create a DLP policy. And you also need to add and modify it pretty often, depending on your business. And if you do it manually, you may have fat fingering or you may make a mistake to implement the policy. So I really suggest to look on what you do and how you do it. And the last two is reporting and logging. The more richer is the information, the better reports you're able to create for your HR department, for your board to explain and show how your product is working, and logging. If you're using a SIM, then it means you will need to use multiple logging options to log your vendor to the SIM. I want to summarize quite a short explanation, but I hope we can spend more time answering questions as well. Where do you start? Every person you will ask will probably tell you to start from different things. I think it's important to starting from assessing the information you have right now, understanding what do you have, how people connect to the office, do you route all the traffic, do you have a secure web gateway or firewall as a service when you go to the internet. And then you can think about it, what is going to be the easier things to do that will not impact the users. For example, writing shadow IT report, understand what kind of application are going on right now. After you doing such report, you can decide what to block and not to block with secure web gateway. You can use CASB to connect to SaaS applications and IaaS instances. No user impact, but now you have visibility to understand if you have a problem there. Based on what you see and how secure is your environment, you can start crawling. You can implement controls. You can block stuff or alert stuff. Later on, you do another assessment and decide what you're doing next. If you currently use a remote solution that tunnel all the traffic back to the organization, you may want to implement secure web gateway first, then go on the ZTNA, start splitting the traffic, but still maintain the security. So it's quite important what to do and where to go from here.
Actually, Evgeny, I apologize for interrupting, but I know I do mean to try and hold the questions to the end, but I guess there's one that's relevant in the middle of your talk track, so forgive me for the interruption.
No, it's fine.
But we do have a question on this slide and your point about crawl, walk, run, and in fact, I know Mike Shurich will speak to this a little bit later today as well. But when you think about assess, what does the question is, how can you, if you could give more color on what assess looks like? Is that a scorecard? Is that a tool? Is that what does assess? How do you
simple tools that will be available from any SASE provider or CASB provider is to create a shadow IT report, understand what kind of application you have right now. In the beginning, we mentioned around 600 different applications that currently exist on the internet, not just the websites. So by taking your existing secure web gateway solution or the firewall solution, exporting the log for the last 7 days or 14 days, putting them in the CASB will give you a very good view and overview of what you have right now. After that, you can decide, and you probably have an eye opening on the applications that are running right now to see, okay, do I want to block them? If you want to block them, do you have the means to block them right now? Or maybe you need to have a solution like Secure Web Gateway to block them right now. Same can be done with where people are connecting from home back to the office. Similar to this, by connecting a CASB solution or CSPM solution to your SaaS IaaS SaaS applications, you're going to have a view of where you are right now.
Wonderful. And perhaps a related question on this slide as well. You talked a bit about crawl and walk. The question is, could you double click on what it means to run?
Run, in my mind, means that you right now have a groups of sanctioned and unsanctioned applications in your company. You block everything unsanctioned. You have a way for user to potentially submit information of what need to be opened. You are in zero trust on the ZTNA part. You provide access to people or to the data centers or the SaaS applications using two-factor authentication, using a device posture check to understand that it's your device. And if it's not your device, you may have a different policy or will not have access. You have DOP and data classification for your applications. You're actually checking and scanning files that have been uploaded to OneDrive or different other SaaS services. You also checking what's happening with your IaaS, AWS, and GCP.
Sounds great. And actually, Evgeniy, maybe for my own curiosity, what percentage of companies, now that you're breaking these down, what percentage of these companies that you see kind of fall into the crawl, fall into the walk, and fall into the run categories?
I'll say crawl probably around 60, walk around 30, and run, we're talking about 5, 10, very, very small, very small. It's just so many things going on. And I think, as everybody can agree, COVID-19 really accelerated the push. So COVID-19 moved us home, so we need to change our controls. COVID-19 told us that I don't want to manage things on-prem because I don't want to go on reboot servers. How about I'm going to move them to a cloud? By moving them to a cloud, it means I now need to check and be more diligent on what's happening with AWS, Azure, GCP. It's a combination of things. So there's almost like a race right now of what we should do to make sure we are secure. There's this big talk about what will happen in 6 months. Would we learn that more people get hacked, just didn't know about it? So people want to be proactive and check.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks, Evgeniy. Sorry about that interruption.
Great. I'm actually done with the summary. I think it's a good time for question, maybe.
Sounds great. Then I guess I interrupted at a good time. There's a couple on the line. I guess this time I'll actually move backwards in the questions. The first from Abhijit. How can SASE help in securing data that needs to be shared outside of my enterprise with business partners or external users?
Oh, I like the question. I guess the question here, how do you share the data with them? If you using your corporate Dropbox and your corporate OneDrive or whatever the tool you use, for example, in my company, we use Office 365, so we use OneDrive, and I need to open a share for a business partner. So there's two things. One, when you upload the file to OneDrive, do you only share this with your business partner? Let's say it's Kevin, or do you actually have a public link? SASE, as part of CASB over API, will able to see and check who you're sharing with, and there's a company policy to alert or block. Second, when or if, I hope when, you implement data classification and the files will be classified and you upload these files to the internet, two things may happen. You secure web gateway will check the file and say this file shouldn't be goes there, or over API, your CASB provider will check the classification of the file And in this case, may encrypt the file or tell you, excuse me, you cannot share this file. It's forbidden. I'm going to remove the file.
Wonderful. We have a question from an anonymous question. I'll try and summarize it a little bit and then sort of provide the question at the end of it. So biggest challenge is for customers who want best of the best, but there's no way to truly deliver good SASE and zero trust design with piecemeal vendors. Customers want to look for single vendors. What is your recommendation for where to converge? I guess maybe rather than a recommendation on vendors, but just, are there functional groups that look like they're converging well? Or if you have recommendations on, as you look at SASE.
I think Big Glass doing quite a good job on converging the security part in my mind.
Well, thank you for that.
So here's a couple of things that you wanna really think about them. There are certain things that you probably can divide and conquer, and there are certain things that are going to be very hard. So let's talk about secure web gateway. If you want to implement SSL inspection, and in my mind, you should implement SSL inspection, it's going to be very hard to use two vendors here. Let's say you use one vendor for CASB and one vendor for secure web gateway, but as part of your CASB implementation, you want to scan inline traffic. It's pretty hard to decrypt the traffic twice. It can be done on-prem. I did it personally with different ways, but it's not easy, it's not pretty, and there's a lot of overhead that need to be done here. So this is one of the parts that our person suggests to make sure it's the same vendor, because it's just very, very similar controls. Other things could be that where you can be done differently could be the identity part. Maybe the device posture check. If you want to do it differently, have a particular vendor doing it for you because you want to check for something particular. Maybe SD-WAN or any other network equipment you want to do. CSPM or to check your IIS potentially can be done by a different vendor. What I'll suggest here is try to paint a picture of where your organization is going for the next 3 years, not 1 year. Understand the business needs, because the only way you will secure the money is to get the business needs and align your security to the business needs. And this way you have a better picture to see. Also, when you talk to a vendor, ask for a roadmap. Understand what you're missing, understand what's happening, sign the NDA, because you want to know what will happen with this vendor in 3-4 years.
Yeah, it's a fair point. As we move, there's a lot of questions, Evgeniy. You've triggered some curiosity. Can you go a little deeper on why? I think you hinted at it, but why something like ZTNA should be considered in place of VPNs, and if you're thinking
it's a very popular topic. Yes.
Yeah, there's a best practice on how to migrate.
So let's start from best practice, how to migrate. I think it's more interesting. You need to deploy this in a small group. Don't, like in my mind, never try to go one big bang and deploy it everywhere. Deploy it in a small group. You have an options to monitor the applications, because one of the biggest challenges with moving from remote access, traditional remote access to ZTNA, is to understand exactly what the application I need access to. Because eventually, I don't want to provide wide access. I want to minimize the access. So installing ZTNA, even on top of remote access right now solutions, in most cases it's possible, to monitor where the traffic is going, to build a map of all your applications. And in any case, it's a good hygiene to have a CMDB of application you need to have. It's one of the biggest requirements as a CISO that the CISOs want to do, is to understand the assets on the application stuff. After you know the applications and the access they need, now you can decide what to do. Certain ZTNA providers will not able to route all the protocols. But after you know the applications, you now need to, you can know what's happening. VoIP, for example, could be a challenge in some cases, but it really depends on your VoIP provider. So if your list of applications is very legit, it's only TCP, there is no issues, then you have a much easier way to migrate right now. If you see problems, you need to think if you can fully migrate or not. After that, you can start slowly moving users to the TNA solution and see if there's issues by removing the remote access one. Now, I want to elaborate more why I think it's important. A couple of things. In majority of the cases, the remote access solutions, the legacy one or the one that have been around for 15 years, provide you access to the organization. And I can tell you, unfortunately, that the moment I ask the companies in the workshops we do, what happened with the connection when the person landed in the network, I have no answer. Nothing happening. Just a wide access. I can go anywhere I want. So by changing the access to an IP range to an application, potentially over HTTP, SSH, or any other protocol, I minimize by a lot what you can do. Yes, you can claim if it's an RDP, then I can still jump, but it's not a wide range. I have much less privileges on what I can do. Also, if I starting to do this by application and ports, if your computer is infected, for the malware to move from your laptop to the company is much harder right now. It's not Wild West. Hope it's answered the question. Actually, I need to repeat some of the parts. Very popular question is, do I split or not split traffic? In my mind, you can split traffic if there's a way for you to inspect the traffic later on with Secure Web Gateway.
This one is interesting. It's not one that we typically hear about, but it's an interesting consideration as you have new either frameworks or technologies that get introduced. So how do you see SASE adoption impacting how teams will organize themselves? So we'll see, and maybe my interpretation of this is, will security teams need to be organized differently? Will IT teams need to be organized differently?
I think the teams need to organize differently besides SASE as well. There's a huge disconnect between the endpoint guys, the cloud guys, and the network guys. It's been happening around for the last 5 years. So even without SASE, there is much more collaboration needed between the teams. And even if maybe it's not going to be the same teams, but there should definitely will be checks. We're going to a cloud. It doesn't mean that you're going to have your own firewall in the cloud. You should talk to the network team, what kind of firewalls they use, and if you want to use the same firewall. So the conversion between teams should already be happening, or at least have a conversation and a joint discussion. And frankly, for the last 9 months with COVID, many companies right now do a better job to understand, do I have such capability in my company before I buy a new solution in any case? And this SASE, I think, yes, it will continue because it's kind of all coming under this same buckets.
Wonderful. Next question, actually, also an interesting one. As you think about SASE and the evolution to SASE, how do companies, in your experience with your clients, how do companies generally budget for this? Does it tend to replace existing budget? Do folks have to think about new budgets that have to be created? I think they're trying to think through the costing as they look into 2021.
Yeah, I'll give you the most popular question in cybersecurity. It depends, and then I will then I will elaborate.
Good answer.
It's a combination. I guess the ones that are trying to do a good job, they're trying to understand on the refresh cycle. So if your current secure web gateway, for example, need to be refreshed in the next year, it's a very good timing right now to start building the use case and the business case to potentially move it to the cloud. Same can happen with remote access. But there are things that doesn't exist, like CSPM or CASB over API or the DLP. Then you have to build a new budget, explain the business case, explain why it's needed, potentially explain how it's gonna make your security better, what potentially it may remove, and ideally show examples of what happened with the industry, where the industry is going, why it's important for my company. It's become a bit easier because there's so many examples. We don't need always to talk about home hardware, breach. There's many other breaches that happen on target breach. There's unfortunately so many things happen in the industry that we have many examples how we can prevent and what we can do with the information to secure it better.
Right. We have another convergence question, but from a different perspective. Can you speak about ease of use? For example, do I duplicate DLP policies across multiple dashboards when it comes to SASE? This person is concerned about logistics and time requirements.
DLP policy is an amazing example of what you don't want to duplicate. Two reasons. Number one, the more you duplicate the policy, the more option you're going to have for fat fingering and potentially have an error and make a mistake. Two, it's just easy to do all the policy in one dashboard. So why would you do it in multiple version dashboard if you can? Yes, unfortunately, there are still email in some cases that need to be done or endpoint security that need to be done. So the DLP part is quite hard. We don't have a way to do DLP under one dashboard for everything right now. But at least there's a way to minimize this. For example, CASB Secure Web Gateway. I can do it under one vendor. I can potentially use CASB over API to connect to my Office 365 and check for DLPs there as well.
Wonderful. Trying to pick between these. Actually, this one just came in. Is there an interaction between SASE and zero trust concepts? And in fact, Evgeniy, I'll add on top of this one. We often do get a lot of questions, as different frameworks and philosophies are introduced. There's often confusion between them. Like, is this an evolution of another one? Do they coexist? How do
Secure Web Gateway and zero trust, or not?
SASE and zero trust.
So zero trust is a concept that apply not only for ZTNA. Let's go to the network part. If you have a data center on-prem that is a flat network and all the servers can talk between themselves, by introducing zero trust on the network, I now divide the connectivity that the servers cannot just purely connect. This is zero trust approach. And I can call it, majority of the time we call it micro segmentation. I can add to this that now Evgeniy used to connect to all the servers by using his host IP, but right now Evgeniy can only connect by using his username and password. It means I now have a policy that only allow Evgeniy and not any IPs that look like Evgeniy, or somebody came and plugged the device instead of Evgeniy. So another option of zero trust. ZTNA is part of all this zero trust journey, because it is a journey, it's not an easy journey, that add for the remote connectivity back to the environment by using applications and users as well.
Evgeniy, one of our earlier questions, I think, came when you were talking about performance. So your comments about scaling and upgrading challenges with the appliances rings true. Do you think public cloud architectures will help in getting around these issues?
Definitely. One of the native ideas about what does it mean cloud architecture is, instead of building big boxes for the future, we're using small compute and we scale as we need. And when their demand is bigger, it's scaling. When demand is lower, it's going down, like during holidays. The interesting part here in my mind is simple. As an end user, why do you care? You should forget about this. This is the beauty of as a service. You look on the SLA, you understand what the company tell you. You should ask how they're actually doing this, if they're actually doing this for you. But the moment you realize they're doing this for you, the next thing you ask is for a dashboard with a green or red light, see if it's working or not working, and you forget about this. You have many, many other things that you need to be doing as part of security professional. You don't want to worry about availability of the vendor. And I hope you have SLA and the company to pay for SLA in case they miss the SLA, and it's become not your problem.
This last, oh, actually, there are two more. So I guess this is more of a timing question. As we think about SASE, the security answer, that's the only right security answer, I suppose. But for this person, she's asking about whether COVID and remote workforce and the impact of this on SASE, and more specifically, when when hopefully the impact of COVID resides, and as we go back into either at least something of a different new normal, will SASE and its concepts accelerate, or do you think it will evolve, or do you think maybe it slows down?
I think as many things we have, the moment we see it's convenient, the moment we develop that we can order pizza online on the phone, I don't think any of us calling and ordering pizza, we can just do it on the phone, have our previous pizza order, for example. Same with the idea of protecting you where you are. We just released a huge amount of laptops to people. So I hope we're going to go back to whatever the normal it is. I don't think people just take the laptops away and give them back the workstations. They already have the laptops. And even before COVID-19, people were traveling, people were taking the work home with them. So the idea of protecting people from home already started. I don't think it will go back. It will just remain there. And reinforce my previous question. Why would I need to buy appliances? Why would I need to care about availability and scalability if it's just give it to somebody else? The move to the cloud will not stop. So it means we need to protect the cloud. The move to the services such as SaaS will not stop. Look at what happened yesterday. Slack got acquired with a lot of money. It's just amazing experience and explanation why as a service companies will make sense. I think SASE will continue a lot, and just for the fun, look and search on the network companies that now have SASE as part of their main page. I think every week another company that didn't even play in the space, now playing in the space. CDN companies, endpoint solutions companies, DLP companies. There's probably two major acronyms right now, the SASE and XDR. And they become very, very popular, and many vendors are going to move there. So it's not going to stop. It's going to accelerate. It's going to just move up and up.
Wonderful. And you may have actually just answered the last question, but it's an investment and budgeting question for your clients. Do you see them investing less in on-prem infrastructure? And do you think they will decrease the amount of spend on both the IT and security side for on-prem as conversations like SASE take more hold? It
sounds like an investor question. I think it depends, and I'll explain why. For the user traffic, it probably will move to cloud and will decrease. So branch offices, for example, but we still have protection of the data centers. We still have B2B connections to our business providers. It's still going to remain, at least for 5, 6, 7 years. We still need to connect to our partners. We need to provide access to users. We need to protect the data centers. So the certain parts will change. Certain parts will remain the same. We're probably going to see many more VM firewalls, for example, or security over virtual. But it's not like we completely change the infrastructure right now.
Wonderful. I think that's all the questions. I hope you're not too tired from all those questions.
No, it was fun.
A bit of rapid fire there. Well, Evgeniy, thank you for your time sharing your thoughts on foundational SASE concepts and some of your recommendations on best practices. We look forward to hearing more from you. We recommend folks look for the Security Architecture podcast to hear more about some of the things that Evgeniy talked about. Thanks again.
And we had Bill Glass twice on the show. You guys are more than welcome to watch. A lot of fun and very good conversations.
Wonderful. Thanks, Evgeniy. And
thank you very much.